Welcome to ESGX Live. Thank you all for joining us from around the world. We've had well over 100 people register to be here today, so I'm sure it is going to be an absolutely fascinating discussion. And what I thought I'd do is just start with my own version of, maybe it's not gender-lens investing precisely, but certainly a story of supporting and investing in women. And way back in about 2004, not long after we launched the Pottinger business, we met a lady by the name of Annabel Chauncey, and I was living in Australia at the time. And she was a student studying law at one of Australia's universities, and she started out helping us a little bit with the kids. She was clearly a smart young lady, so very shortly after that we decided she'd be much better working in our business, and so she became part of the Pottinger team. And she was working part-time, she was still studying at university. And what she really wanted to do, it turned out, through the various discussions we had as we got to know her, was create a school for disadvantaged children in Africa. And she'd visited there and had struck a particular bond with the country. And in short, we encouraged her to pursue this dream, although she was very young. Maybe because she was very young, we wanted to support her. And so with her partner, she gathered together the resources needed and the money needed to finance buying land in Africa and opening a school. And that school eventually opened in 2011. I thought I'd just show some of the, a single picture here of kids looking very much like ordinary kids anywhere in the world. But part of the point of this is it's embedded in a community looking after kids, often whom have lost family members, that are thoroughly disadvantaged. And the way that this project has been brought to life is by close involvement with the community. And there has been an enormous amount of effort that has been put into making the business of the school, it's a not-for-profit organization, but it needs to be sustainable, making it sustainable through involvement with the community, support from the community on simple things from agriculture and helping to grow food to feed the children, to installing solar energy so that the children, particularly girls, have an extra hour of reading time at night that they would otherwise not get. And the impact of all that actually makes me quite emotional talking about it. Absolutely amazing impact on so many lives. I think they have two or three campuses now, over 1,000 children. They've just opened a new boarding house. A wonderful illustration of what can be done. And I think with that, whilst I just get a little bit teary, I will hand over to Paul to introduce today's episode all about gender lens investing. Over to you, Paul.
All right, welcome everybody to ESGX. Elsa de Morais Sarmento is with me today. We are the co-editors of the Global Handbook of Impact Investing. So Elsa has her stack of copies in Paris, in Europe. I have my boxes of copies here in San Francisco, California. And today we're delighted to have authors of 4 of the chapters with us. But before we introduce them and get started, Elsa, your vision for the Global Handbook of Impact Investing has come to life. It's live, and there are many collaborators with it.
Absolutely. It is a dream come true, and I think it is just the starting point of a long-term contribution to this field, because beyond having some academics and researchers, we also have practitioners, and our pool of authors is very diversified from all corners of the world and all walks of life. So we have with us also people that are actually working in making the difference in gender lens investing.
Great. Yeah, so it's wonderful to have each of you here today. As usual, we're recording this session, so it'll be available free online and globally on esgx.org. And so Nigel, if you can put up the visuals, Nigel Lake, co-producer of ESGX, we have very special guests today. So joining us is Carmen Correa of Pro Mujer, and Angelica Rotondaro. Angelica is based in Brazil, so tudo bem, benvenido. And we also have Michael Ngoasong and Richmond Lamptey, who are based in the EU and the UK. But we'll talk about some case studies from Africa, including in Cameroon. We have Ted Jackson and Elsa, who have co-authored the third of 4 chapters on gender lens investing. And they'll talk about their experience, especially working with multilateral. And then Kristin Hull of NIA Impact Capital, who is an active fund manager and wealth manager, serving the needs of gender lens investing, as well as climate investing and diversity investing. So we're super delighted to have all of you with us today. We're going to go no less than an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Please, in the audience, put your questions in the chat or the question box, but it's easy to reply to them in the chat. And we're going to talk through 3 big questions today. What's happening on the ground today in gender lens investing? What are financial instruments that are being used to boost gender with an investment profile? And then the third is, what's the future look like? So those are the 3 big categories. And after question number 1, we're going to take a poll with the audience. So let's kick it off. Carmen and Angelica, tell us what it's like on the ground of gender lens investing in Latin America and the Caribbean and other geographies around.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to be part of this book. I'm in the field of impact investing for over almost 10 years now. And I think that this mix of something which, you have practitioners at the same time that you have researchers, I think it makes a lot of sense, plus the geography that really makes it a global handbook. So thank you for that and congratulations. I know all the work that was behind. Okay, so I have been working in the field for over 9 years and then really looking at food chains, circular economy, and gender empowerment. And in this part of gender empowerment, I have this close relationship with Morais, whom I know for many years. And that's why then for the book, we decided, why don't we take the chance that Morais was completing its 30th anniversary this year, right? Last year, right? And why not then write the case of the whole process, of including gender lens investing as part of the portfolio. But first, I think there is a print screen, but it's in the Morais website. Anyways, that it's a bit of the what is the situation in terms of gender lens investing in Latin America. So in terms of impact investing, there is right now $5 billion of committed capital by over 40 investment funds. But when we look at it from this, really how much of that capital really goes to women entrepreneurs in the region, there is still this $93 billion financial gap. And it is, there was this huge study that shows that the reason why many of the women-led startups and businesses fail is because of lack of financial capital. So although this amount is big and still big, $93 billion, it also shows that there is an opportunity for really focusing on how to really start and promote and look at gender lens investing in the region. And of course, and besides, I think that all the other points related not only to the financing gap, but also the gender gap, which then, it's still strong. And then there is also this only 9% of the leadership positions in companies are women. So in the chapter, we also bring this aspect of saying what could and should be done in terms of really integrating a culture of really promoting that all the gaps that relate sometimes to education, and that are not only external, but also internal to the companies, how they should be approached. But with this, I live with Carmen, that is, of course, much more into this whole strategy and story of Morais.
Thank you, Angelica, and well, congratulations again, Paul. Thank you very much for this invitation and for inviting us to be part of this book. ProMujer, as you all know, we were founded to empower underserved women to achieve their full potential. So from the beginning, we were created with this gender focus. We have been operating now for more than 30 years in Latin America, and touching the lives of millions of women and empowering women's goals through a holistic approach, because we include in this approach and the services we provide not only financial services, but also education and health services too. But of course, the needs and challenges of women have changed. The needs of the women are not the same that were 30 years ago. So 30 years ago, women were not requesting, or even they don't need as much as, for example, technology as they need right now, digital education as they may need right now. So the changes, there are changes and needs that, of course, we have to listen. And of course, we have to imagine that the things that we were providing 30 years ago are not the same things that we need to provide right now. So that's our financial portfolio. We have been transitioning from what it used to be a purely microfinance portfolio to include an increased diversification of this portfolio with more tailored investment instrument that can be, of course, covering the needs of these women. And of course, these instruments are always designed with a gender perspective. So we were created in 1990 in El Alto in Bolivia, and we have disbursed since then to $4 billion in microcredits, in very small loans to these women. We have impacted and reached more than 2 million women, and we have delivered, as I said, what it is financial inclusion literacy programs, which enable clients to manage their personal finance and also strengthen their businesses. Alongside this digital literacy and also entrepreneurial training, because that is key and needed for the development of their businesses. And also, as I said, also healthcare services, because if these women are not in good health, they won't be able to achieve what they want to. So listening to our clients, it's when we started designing also new products, new services, and it's when we started diversifying also our portfolio. New products such as microinsurance, such as savings accounts, such as housing lending, and mobile banking. And we also embark ourselves in digital transformation processes, because technology is what can allow us to reach more women, it will enable us to scale and also to get more data, more information, more immediate feedback of what we have to design and the products we are serving. This transition process was based on market studies, of course, but beyond creating new financial products and training programs and also digitalization of our clients, we also work on unlocking this catalytic capital to be invested in SMEs. And we developed in 2019 two new financial instruments. One with Ditken Impact, a Canadian group, to launch the ILU Women's Empowerment Fund. This is a gender lens investment fund. And the same year in Mexico, together with New Ventures Mexico, we developed what it's named Biguala, a financial instrument for revenue-based lending. This year, we are designing a new innovative financial instrument with Acro Partners and also with UN Women. And we are expecting to launch, this is a gender bond We are expecting to launch the same this year. We are also creating, with the support of PISA Foundation, a Center for Entrepreneurship, a center to support women entrepreneurs. So with this center, we will be able to give women the needed support to develop their businesses and also to find that needed capital, to be prepared to receive that capital too. So fostering for us gender lens investing is not as simple, and there is not a single recipe, a unique tool. There are many things that have to be done, and those interested in embarking in gender lens investing, for us, they don't need to be an expert. They just need to be committed to this type of investment, and they need to find organizations such as ProMujer that have years of experience, in this case, working in Latin America, and that they have their foots on the ground so they can make it happen.
Carmen,
So,
that's
thank you
fantastic.
very much.
Yeah, it's so many customer segments and women that you're supporting over so many countries. So that's at ProMujer, which of course means for women. So let's take a pause there, because we're going to come back in the second phase to more about the investing channels. So appreciate that overview. So we have a diverse crowd, because we have men writing chapters on gender lens investing. So Michael Ngoasong and Richmond Lamptey of the Open University, tell us some of the experiences on the ground, because one of the case studies in your chapter is about Cameroon in Africa. So remind everybody where Cameroon is in Africa and what's happening. How is gender lens being applied?
Thank you very much, Paul, and for inviting us, and congratulations also to you and Elsa for the book. My interest with gender lens issues from a Cameroon perspective, it's a long story. Right from 2000, in the very first celebration of the International Women's Day, and experiencing the activism of the communities where I was brought up, and the sort of transformation in the debate that started. Cameroon is a Central African country, neighboring to Nigeria, Chad, Central African Republic, and so on. And I'm here with Richmond, who is going to give some more examples of Ghana. On Ghana, we've tried to make it more interesting so we are not repeating ourselves. I'm going to focus in this introduction more putting myself from the perspective of the women entrepreneurs. And there is a lot of discussion where there is a temptation to focus too much on the difficulties and the challenges, whether it's the collateral, the cultural and legal issues around property ownership, which makes it difficult for some women to be able to raise capital without the permission of husband or partner, and cultivating business networks, which is ironic because the whole notion of association and community group is something that is very well established in not only in Cameroon, in many African countries. But at the same time, these informal networks face many difficulties with trying to make inroads into the formal business and investment sector, and how to deal with those sorts of challenges. So while you have all the gender gap around even the challenge with opening the bank account and some of the gender policies that are typically favoring men, what we are seeing on the ground is major reforms and changes taking place. And so putting it from the perspective of the women, you have almost 70% of micro and small businesses are started by women. But they struggle the most to sustain and grow these businesses. And so we touched on some of those examples in our chapter, including those right at the very low base where you could think that starting a business requires a lot of money, but there are stories of many of these women who start right from a low base as $2 as the starting capital to which is the base in which they start to grow. And then you have other types of businesses where the diaspora is very important in this, where you have women who have studied abroad and seeing, being open-minded and seeing these opportunities, and then returning home to start not only to run some of these businesses, but to inspire some of these women. There is an example that I've looked at, St. John's Girls School in Uganda, which is a typical example. You know, missionaries and volunteers came in from Canada, and the starting point is the young girls. And when you start from that young base of young girls, starting to train them and inspire them that you can be entrepreneurs, you can be leaders, you can be managers of businesses. And then the challenge is what happens after that training. There is also this notion of what you call stereotypical man's job. There's a useful concept in Nigeria called lady mechanics, where you see women in engineering. And then you have those also very successful examples, such as Eden Tree in Ghana, which has succeeded to raise over £1 million of gender lens investing and have an integrated company from farm to market in the agri-business sectors. So all these examples are showing that things are happening on the ground. We are seeing progress, but at the same time, a lot of work still needs to be done to break some of these gender biases. And hopefully, during this webinar, we are going to share some of those examples with respect to the funding side and the way in which some of these women have managed to take advantage of these different products. So I'll hand over to Richmond to give his own overview.
Thank you very much, Michael. So I'm going to look at it from more of the finance, the fund manager side of it. My background has been in banking for about almost 10 years before coming to academia. And for the past 5 years, I've been with impact investing through research and then through consulting, among others. Based on our research and what we've covered on the ground, we've noted that there are diverse gender-less initiatives on the ground. And these are funds that are flowing from the regional level, from different financial institutions to bank-based and capital market-based intermediaries for small and medium-sized enterprises. Some of them have the gender-less perspective, others too are broad focus, SME focus. According to the Global Network of Impact Investing, they've indicated that there are about $12 billion are flown to Africa as of 2019 through intermediary funds and then through bank-based institutions. A specific example of a gender-less initiative, which has recently been launched by the African Development Bank, is the Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa, called AFAWA, launched by the African Development Bank, which is a $5 billion fund purposely for women-owned businesses. And the way they've crafted it, they are looking beyond just financing, but also about ensure that there's capacity development. There's also about guarantee ways to de-risk most of the challenges that women-owned businesses struggle or suffer or confront in terms of trying to access funding in Africa. We also have the Growing Africa Fund, that is about $500 million fund that's also supporting broadly small and medium-sized enterprises. But the key thing to it is that they have gender lens embedded initiative in most of their funding. Their investees, various categories of investees that they have, ensure that they empower women, they support women businesses, and across many countries in Africa. There are many other examples that I'm going to share during this webinar, which I'm going to put in the chat box and also share with you as we go on with the session. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Richmond, and thanks for your deep dive research in the chapter on gender lens investing, progress in Africa. We'll come back later for a question, but one question I'll just tee up now is Sylvia asks, with skepticism by some investors of investing in rural and maybe even rural Africa, what are the methods, what are the best methods by which entrepreneurial women can access that capital? So I'll just leave that there. We'll come back to it in sort of our second wave. But please ask your questions in the chat box. I know all of you are very engaging, and so we'd love to hear what you're working on. Okay, so Elsa and Ted, both of you work with multilaterals around the world, and Elsa, you in very emerging markets as well as developed markets. What's happening on the front line, and what can we learn from gender lens investing from those frontline stories?
Shall I start?
Go for it.
Yes, please. Go for it.
All right. Our chapter and the rest of our chapters have plenty of examples and insights on how some instruments are working. I think I would like to pick up not on any particular information that is at least in my chapter and Ted's, but also picking up on the conversation that we've been having about Africa and by Richmond and Michael, and to also speak about the north-south duality in a way, because the gender lens market continues still to be a bit dominated by the global north, what we call the global north, and it's very much still a North American phenomenon, if we can put it this way. And so it has been very much driven by organizations that are based in Europe or in the States or in Canada, and this means donors, DFIs, investment banks, even foundations, and so on. So we have also seen a trend whereby, and not focusing exactly on multilaterals, we'll get there, but now on the bilateral example of the Finns and what is called the Finn Fund, which I think it's quite interesting. It's a Finnish development financier. It's also an impact investor. And it is not a very big organization, but it's rather agile, and it has been investing in SMEs at the end of, well, that's the information I had at the end of 2019. Finn Fund, that's the name, had 183 projects in 52 countries and mostly in Africa. It's totaling it's around €1 billion. And what I find very interesting is that their whole staff have been trained to be able to identify gender-related issues. So there is no kind of separation about the ones that are focusing on gender lens investing from others or separate departments. Everybody has the same kind of training so that everybody has the same lenses. And this way they ensure that there is a commitment. So we have here this relationship between the North and the South, which is quite interesting, and that it is a trend that we have been seeing, and also in the hope that then countries in the South can also become or be put on the driver's seat and become more empowered to also drive their own agenda. So this Finn Fund is putting special emphasis on sectors that are working towards sustainability, on forestry and agriculture, and it takes a very broad view on what it is meant by pushing towards gender equality. So they had 70% of their new investment decisions targeting developing countries, least developing countries, which is quite interesting, and countries in the lower or lower middle income, which is in general, I mean, it's very easy to go and support the best of let's say, of developing pool, let's say. And even in some, in various instances, I've seen that investments in the poor, in SMEs, are not actually done in the smallest. The money is and the financing is put into the medium and largest firms right there at the border, and not in the key sectors where you can see that there are the biggest needs. So I think this is a very good example, not only in terms of really going down into the bottom of who is actually needing in the African continent, but it also operates in Asia and Latin America, but also in terms of its organizational workings and in the adoption of a consistent gender lens in the organization. There's another thing now, moving on to multilateral, because I've also been working with the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Africa and the Pacific. The acronym is ESGX. And looking into what they have done in terms of trade and investment. They have partnered with SEAF. SEAF stands for Small Enterprise Assistance Funds, to unlock gender lens investment in Asia. So it is an initiative that is being implemented under a regional program, a wide regional program supported by the government of Canada, which is called Catalyzing Women's Entrepreneurship, Creating a Gender Responsive Entrepreneurial Ecosystem. And it's a wide program for Asia and the Pacific, and it supports the growth of women entrepreneurs through three different means. Enabling policy environment. So you can see that is acting very broadly in the enabling environment in Asia and the Pacific. Access to finance, of course, but also the usage of ICT for entrepreneurship, which is key nowadays given the pandemic. So SEAF is a global impact investment fund manager and also an emerging market investor. They have invested in 400 companies in 29 countries in Asia and the Pacific. And they focus beyond the standard areas of women's empowerment and equality. They focus on health and education, clean and smart energy solutions, sustainability in agribusiness, and also financial and technological inclusion. So SEAF is working with ESGX, so the United Nations Commission for Asia and the Pacific, and they are very committed to harmonize women's economic empowerment frameworks in the region and gender equality tools. And this connects very well with Angelica and Carmen's and Maria's chapter, because they have also described a tool, which in their case, it's called the ILO Women's Empowerment Scorecard. In the case of ESGX, so this is being implemented, and it's very interesting seeing the way that these scorecards are being developed, and I think also coming together. So these have been done in these two different regions, the one in our chapter mostly in Latin America, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's mostly in Latin America, and this one in Asia and the Pacific. And yes, ESGX, and I will be sharing the link that has been working with SEAF to produce a SEAF Gender Equality Scorecard Manual. I think this is quite recent and very interesting to look at. So this Gender Equality Scorecard, this GES, is really a harmonized tool to assess women's economic empowerment and gender equality in SMEs, right, being implemented in Asia and the Pacific. And it's meant to support, all types of, investors from funds to companies, organizations, to calculate consistently gender scores in various dimensions. So this is really a framework that is publicly available. It has been produced as a common public good. I'll be sharing the link, and it is very useful to look into that and to consistently observe what is happening around the world so that we can converge to a set of frameworks that are more harmonized regionally and ideally globally, and that can be applied throughout. So I think we are moving towards this direction very, very fast. This is something that we can pick up on later on for discussion.
Yeah, so exciting to see progress on so many fronts across so many boundaries and unifying together. So Ted, how about you? What's your experience in seeing what's happening on the ground? And then we'll go to Kristin.
Sure, thank you. I think, first of all, when watching Elsa give her remarks, you can see the book in the background. I want you to know that there are 1,200 pages in that book. And although it looks very compact, indeed it is very compact, you have to understand the scope of this project and the achievement of the editors. I mean, it's wonderful to be part of it, but that is a major contribution. So I just wanted to say that, and the people who buy the book will get a resource tool for, the next 4 or 5, 10, even 10 years. One project that comes to mind for me is one recently done by the Caribbean Development Bank. And it supported, and I was involved with this with a team of people, the production of gender equality policy and action plans for local, that is national development banks in Jamaica, in St. Lucia, and in Belize. And there were several things that were very interesting about that. One is that these tools, these GPAPs, are very strong on results and accountability and holding people, including the board and the CEO and appointing a gender focal person to push for performance and to report on performance around products. These are mainly loan products for small businesses, and really focusing on the needs of women in particular. The other thing that happened in that project was it was pretty clear that there were some amazing women leaders in these development banks, but they're not visible. And so back to Elsa's point, they're not visible at the national level. Sometimes they're not even visible to their own boards, but the amazing leadership skills and creativity of these leaders really impressed me. And so, how do you amplify those voices, make them more visible? And that's a situation that's multiplied, thousands of times around the world, literally. So
one quick question. How can leaders of a development bank not be visible to their boards? That sounds quite...
No, I'm overstating it. I mean, those are people who are often eclipsed by men in the boardroom. Patriarchy is pretty sneaky as well as brutal. So, but I want to make another point about our own chapter, and that is, and it's a larger contextual point, and that is, it starts with patriarchy and how creative and resilient that is, even when it loses ground. And so we're very interested in the role of critical knowledge in building a larger but very durable gender lens investing field, and particularly using independent knowledge that investigates failure as well as success, what works and what doesn't work in a very open way, and trying to, in fact, strengthen the field through the use of independent knowledge. So we have more to say about that, but I just wanted to make that point as a broader observation. So thanks.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you, Ted. All right. Well, Kristin, you're with us. I know you're still recovering from your second vaccine, but love to have you share some of the frontline stories that you're seeing. If you are available, come off a video and audio.
I'm available and not able to start my video.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll listen to you.
Okay. I think that someone on the website is, okay, here we go. Here we go. All righty.
Great. All right. Super.
I'm sorry, you were about to ask a question, Paul.
I was going to say, what's happening on the front lines? Because you see multiple geographies and multiple asset classes. What are products that are helping women, or what are companies you see that are helping women directly, including public equities?
Well, sure. I'm just going to bridge off of what was just said, because I think that you're nailing it. And it came up, can men talk about gender? And absolutely, gender used to be a spectrum, ranging from men to women. And in the Bay Area, we acknowledge lots of genders and across the spectrum. And now recently, gender has become about women. And when we talk about a gender lens, it means thinking about women now. And yet, what would it mean if we just talked about getting the balance? And so what was named often doesn't get named on a webinar like this or in the financial world is the patriarchy. And oftentimes, even though it may have really positive intentions, sometimes not having everybody at the table to make those decisions just doesn't have a great outcome. And so what we're doing at NIA is really thinking about how we can incorporate that gender lens for positive outcomes. So, and I would say across, particularly in the public equities, what we're seeing is that every time we're able to incorporate a gender lens, we can come up with, particularly across the E, the S, and the G, really ways to address all of these different things. So what are we seeing? Definitely there's been a push for boards. Executive teams and boards. And before, that was really a source of elimination for us. When looking at companies, we were probably eliminate at least 50% of the companies that we would look at. And now we're able to see, particularly with SB 826 passed in California and then being picked up by about 5 other states where it's required to have at least one woman on a board when a company IPOs. We're seeing that across the globe kind of pick up and ripple effects about including women in leadership from the beginning. Another area that we're looking at is products and services. So when we're thinking about products and services that are designed for women, are really incorporating, thinking about women, companies are actually doing better. And one example of that is Etsy. And that's a publicly traded company that actually was a B Corp before their IPO. So they really are baked with purpose. And over 80% of the sellers on Etsy before COVID times were women. Many of them were stay-at-home women working with families at home. And of course, they still are to this day. And thinking about sustainability, Etsy's really helping these women to have the best businesses that they can and really think about how to have customer service and then also how to deliver their products in a sustainable way. Etsy also happens to have, when doing their own identifications, over 60 different gender boxes that you can check. So they really are leading in, they were also one of the first companies to have gender neutral bathrooms. So really building this positive and inclusive place to work such that when they are looking for talent, they can recruit talent really easily away from some other really big tech firms because of this inclusive culture that isn't just for women, but does excel when we're thinking about how can we make an environment inclusive for women, we generally can make it inclusive for others as well.
Super. Yeah, thanks for being so specific, Kristin, and examples. And there's more examples in your chapter across asset classes. We're going to transition to that next wave of the conversation. And Nigel, do you want to speak to the chart you have on the percentage of women on boards? You can see that it's going up over time. Nigel, you're
thinking about,
I just thought it'd be interesting to show this. And this is the percentage of new women directors. So it's very different from the percentage of women directors, which is far lower.
It
is going in the right direction slowly.
Being so specific, Kristin,
but this has been a
examples,
very long journey.
And there's more examples in your chapter across asset classes. We're going to transition to that next wave of the conversation. And Nigel, do you want to speak to the chart you have on the percentage of women on board? Yeah, if you can just mute, because I think there's something weird happening. You can see that it's going up over time.
Yeah, you keep going. I'll switch off. Yeah, I just thought of.
Oh.
All right. So that was weird. That never happened before. All these technical uniqueness. You watch TV and you think, oh, that's easy. They just put up a camera. But many things.
Hopefully that's better now.
Great. So let's, so Nick, our producer, helping this run in the background. We have a poll for everybody. So please get ready to take the poll. There's 2 questions on the poll. So Nick, please launch the poll. And the first question is, for those of you, are you applying gender investing today? And if so, are you doing so? These are check boxes. You can check as many as you want in your investment policy statement, in how you pick an investment, any reporting about your portfolio, maybe there's storytelling and case studies, or maybe it's you're not yet applying and you're here to learn. So, so please check those boxes. And then when you get a chance to go down to question number 2 is this. If you're doing gender lens investing, where is it happening? In your banking and savings account, in community development financial institutions. There's organizations like My C-Note, where it's a platform for doing that. In microfinance, there's platforms like Kiva and Promohair and others, of course. Maybe in business loans, in bond funds, in venture capital and private equity. Maybe there's specific public equity stocks. So Kristin was just speaking of some specific companies. In equity funds, in real estate, or other asset types. So, so check as many boxes as apply to you of what's happening today. And presumably everybody would want to see choices in all of those boxes. But we'll give it another couple moments. And as we prepare the panel to talk about this, we'll talk about the results of the poll in just a moment, but we want to talk about like how can you do this? Like how can everyday people do this in their portfolio? And or how do we influence institutions like pensions or foundations? You know, some foundations are able to not only invest their corpus, but at least in the US, there's a way where you can invest in debt or equity through the grant stream. That's called program-related investing, or PRI. All right, so Nick, total them up. Close the poll. Let's see what the results are. I'm very curious. All right, so good news. 43% of you in the audience who answered are using gender lens as an investment criteria, and almost 40% are using it as some form of storytelling or case study. It's not yet more formal in that only 10% are in portfolio reporting and only 5% in like a formally written investment policy statement. So if you do have influence over a portfolio, your personal one, your family, a foundation, your college endowment you can speak up about, maybe you're a teacher or a firefighter, policeman as part of a union. Those are all places that invest. But about 38% of you said you're not yet applying it. So that's something to consider going forward. All right, so that's topic number one. Topic number two of the poll is, where is it happening? And right now, the winner among the people replying is 38% say microfinance. So that's fantastic. Promohair is one example of that. Muhammad Yunus won a Nobel Peace Prize for prioritizing microfinance as a way to invest in women in Bangladesh and globally around the world. The next biggest is public equity stocks, specific stocks, actually. Equity funds was not checked as much as specific stocks, so that's great. We'd love to hear if you have any companies that you think are doing a great job in gender. Feel free to share those in the chat if you like. And then it looks like banking and savings is happening, about 20%, 15% in business loans, 10% in equity funds, 5% in venture capital. Nobody checked real estate and nobody checked bond funds. And about 30% of people said other asset types. So please feel free to share that in the chat. We'd love to hear what's going on. All right, so very useful to hear from our audience. You can see panelists, our audience is sophisticated. They're going as far as putting it in their investment policy statement, at least using it as a criteria. That's probably one of the reasons why they're here. So reactions, what do you think? So Carmen, Angelica, Elsa, what do you think about microfinance as one of the best ways to do that? I know that was one of the first ways I got into impact investing when I was at Ashoka almost 20 years ago, was seeing positive impact, positive profit.
Yes, of course. As you said, Paul, in the case of microfinance, of course, most of the clients are women. And in the case of Promujer itself, and in the case of the ILU Women's Empowerment Fund, for example, we apply the gender lens in every step. The gender lens actually should be applied to every step during the investment process. So when we are screening, when we are doing the due diligence, when we are even managing our portfolio, and when we are monitoring and reporting, we try to bring in this gender lens. So actually, what we are applying in the ILU Women's Empowerment Fund, for example, are 4 gender lenses. On one hand, of course, we are always looking for the leadership and governance. We are also looking into the value chain. We are looking in the workforce development and equity, and we are also looking into what it has to do to the products and services that are developed, women serve. So, and we are looking into every possible step during the investment process. We always put our lens. So we are questioning, okay, how are you designing and how you are proactively taking into consideration the minor things up to big things in what it has to do to women and gender. So we question the entrepreneurs, we question the organizations where we are going to be investing, how they manage the different aspects. If they are women-led companies or organizations, if they are looking into the business and taking into consideration, for example, new processes, are they taking into consideration how to imply that agenda lens? So that is how we actually look into the processing and the investment process itself.
And Richmond and Michael, what have you seen on the ground? How does the investing happen in Cameroon and other countries? How does investors and investees connect?
So what we see on the ground is many of the different products and vehicles that you use in the poll there. But if I can just illustrate with 3 examples, you have those microfinance organizations. Some of them are owned by individuals or 2 co-founders who start a microfinance institution. And so that's a private commercial organization. A lot of legislation has occurred in African countries at the moment, such as the Oanda Protocol, which is widely adopted in French-speaking African countries. And so that has classified microfinance institutions into different categories to distinguish them from banks, but also to distinguish them in terms of the limits and the range and the extent to which they can provide different types of loan. And so you have these kinds of formal ones, and then you have those that are more group-oriented. So for example, one of the examples in Cameroon in our chapter, which we call C Credit, is a women-only credit union. And it started as an informal savings and loans community group. And through that, they started to work with advisors, including people such as myself, as part of our capacity building and research work that we do, to understand how to write grant proposals, how to understand ways of putting together an application for a venture fund. And that is how they started getting into the approach of applying for certain grants and guarantees, but also being able to understand and be bold enough that they can actually secure a loan as well from high net worth individuals. And so for them, the original mission is women supporting each other. And through that, it means that in some ways, you could say it became a default example where gender lens investing is happening across board in the sense of being led by women, being founded by women, and then prioritizing women so they can also run capacity building projects. They classify the women in terms of those who do not have collaterals. And you start with very small amounts of money. And then as they monitor those, they get to a point where their businesses start to look like businesses with records. And that becomes the collateral with which they start to increase the amount of loan that they give to the women. And then you have other microfinance institutions. There is one that I studied in Kenya, Umati Capital, which decides that having that field experience is too risky for a microfinance, and therefore they decide to go with an approach of digital technology and working with processors. So the target is dairy producers, talking about families with 1 or 2 cows or 3 cows that they own as their dairy farming. And so in that case, when the collectors come to collect the milk, the processors collect the repayments. And then the microfinance institution is then focusing on those processors to deal with all the repayments through a digital app. And the app is then monitoring and recording and capturing. And with that data, they can show to impact investors that are targeting a low-cost insurance for women at that very low level. So you have those combination, and then the other set of microfinance, such as one that we studied in Ghana that has raised capital from JCF investing, Goodwill, where you have that combination of technical assistance from USAID is then come into play in the partnership of securing the venture capital from an impact investor, and they focus a lot on women groups as well. Because by going on women groups, it means they can say all the women who have an association of small agri-business growers, they can support each other. There is an element of collective action and trust, which means that they can create a group bank account for groups of women in small villages as a way of starting to support their members to get started to a point where they can secure loan by themselves. So you have those sector focus, agribusiness, healthcare in terms of childcare. And it's interesting when you run the poll that there were not many bond funds type. In the Africa context, this is still a relatively new terrain. We know, for example, that a country like South Africa is the one where this has really started to be piloted, and we are seeing some lessons come out, such as the Impact Bond Innovation Fund. Where you have a partnership between the local government, the private investor, and working with healthcare units, which is that combination of match funding arrangements, which means that it's an outcome based, depending on the outcomes of performance for those on early childhood health issues. Then you get the funding and the debt and the guarantees that come with that. And the Africa Development Bank has been starting to pilot the green bonds as well. And so there's one they piloted in 2018 called Fit Africa Bond as a way of. So in some ways, the bond funds are starting to be talked about. Still very early days. You would say the first pilots 2018, 2019. But there's still a lot of lessons to be learned to see how that can be rolled out to the same extent as what we are seeing with microfinance.
Yeah, that's a great point, Michael. And we may start to see more sustainable development goals that are originally designed for countries be more and more integrated into investments and investment funds. And obviously SDG 5 around gender equality is one of them. One of the other things we're seeing, at least in the US, in Muni Bonds. There's Muni Bonds, usually issued by governments, but can also be issued by nonprofits. So for example, Low Income Investing Fund helps affordable housing that they did through a $100 million Muni Bond. Elsa and Ted, so what vehicles are you seeing, and are they accessible only to institutions or also to individuals?
Elsa, go ahead.
I just wanted to make here a quick note on one of the comments. Sylvia, I think, where is it? There has been a lot of
group-oriented microfinance.
Yeah, on the microfinance, Sylvia was stating, started very well with rural women in Eastern Africa, but from recent research, many women reported that they no longer use microfinance, as rural women are afraid that microfinance will take their assets. And I found this very, it just touched me, because I assessed various schemes, in particularly in Africa, evaluated Growfin and others, and even when at the African Development Bank, the whole support that the African Development Bank provided to SMEs throughout Africa. And what I saw, and even recently in Cabo Verde, Cape Verde, was precisely, and speaking to these women who got microfinance, they were often, shocked, and they were fearful and did not want to hear about microfinance ever again. And they went through very demanding trainings and got all the support in order to build their own project properly before they got to the microcredit. So all the pieces were in there, and still they were not able to really make it work. And they were the vast majority. There were only a few success cases, and I confirmed this in various types of work that I did in the country, from the public sector and the private sector and so on. And actually it can be a traumatizing experience. And I think basically it's because women need, beyond training and then getting the tools, they need a bit of hand holding for some time after they set up their business. And I think this is not really very much provided. So they need support post getting the loan, whatever instrument we're talking about. So this is something that I think has been pointed out, but it's not being implemented throughout. The other thing that I wanted to say is, looking at the poll and the first question, I noticed that portfolio reporting, at least but I think it is ourselves that are here, just a small sample, but it's still indicative actually of what is happening out there. Portfolio reporting was only 10% of the responses. So this is not really being used. And also why? Because before you report, you need to also measure, right? You need to have the right framework to measure your impact, social and economic impact. And this is actually also one of the topics that we have in our handbook. And we try to bring several areas together, combining impact evaluation methods and all the evaluation area with methods from the social sciences to portray the range of methodologies that we have there in order to make these calculations, to make this assessment. This is actually chapter 16. It starts here from the book. So there is a whole range of methods that you can have access to in order to think about what works for you. And also, after you have these methodologies in place and these structures, you will be you'll find it much easier to report on those credibly. So this is actually a gap that we still find throughout in this in general. Well, I would say in the impact investing field in general.
And Kristin, part of your chapter, Elsa pointed to some of the impact measurements in the book, but you actually have examples and sort of a how-to guide of how to craft an investment policy statement. Is that done easily? How hard is it?
It's so easy. It's so easy. So thank you for the setup and the question. And of course, you can refer to the chapter, and I'm happy to give some tips here. So really just putting a statement about how you're going to think or include women or gender in your investing. And so it could be as simple as, we seek to invest in companies where women are represented in leadership. I will add that I do think women in leadership might just be a lagging indicator. And I think there really are more policies and practices within companies that would promote that. So another sentence you could add to an investment policy statement might be, we seek to invest with companies that have products and services designed for women. Or we invest only in companies that do not use forced arbitration, knowing that it's associated with sexual harassment and both sexual harassment and racial discrimination. So there's just adding a sentence here or there can really make a shift with how you're thinking about not just across, well, I guess, completely across asset classes, but across the entire portfolio pizza pie as to how can that gender lens be inserted here and there and have it shift the way that investors are looking at their companies.
Great. And so, Ted, have you seen examples of that in different investment policies, and how have they been represented?
Well, I mean, in the Gender Lens Investing Action Plans of the Investing in Women project in Southeast Asia, that's a very interesting project from a number of angles, including investment policies. But I want to say something different about that, which is that the Investing in Women is funded by the Australian government and works in Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. And what it does is it uses a 10-year accountable grant to impact investing funds, one of which is SEEF, one other is Root Capital. These are well-known Western funds, in order to de-risk and to promote an expansion of their capacity towards capital, to mobilize capital for women-owned SMEs. And it's a very interesting model. These are, of course, private placements, equity and quasi-equity into SMEs in those countries, owned and run by women. And it seems to be working pretty well. And so now one of the next steps is really to do the same kind of thing with local funds, that is local, investment funds, using this grant tool as an incentive. But it's a long story, and we talk about it in our report, in our chapter, but it's really worth taking a look at.
Got it. And Richmond, is it easy if you live in Africa to invest or not?
Thank you very much. I think it's doable. It's not challenging within the context. But the key thing is that what we've uncovered is the fact that most of the bank-based institutions and the private equity funds, they are positioning themselves, the way they are framing themselves, so that look, they are positioned to attract genderless investing funds for onward investment into SMEs that have more women in those businesses, or those who are backed by women, among others. And most of them also use what we call managed funds. So some of them, for example, like bank-based funds like EcoBank, you're able to attract funding from the Alliance for Green Revolution. So from Agra, they managed the fund about $5 million. And the idea was that they supported SMEs that are into agribusiness. And many of them were, because in agriculture, we have many women in agriculture, they supported them and ensured that we're able to connect them to what we call markets, not only within the country, but then outside Ghana or foreign markets. Also, we have private equity funds, and there's some of the bank-based fund managers that syndicated loans for certain high-end SMEs to ensure that they'll be what the risking. The risk is to ensure that some of these entrepreneurs or these enterprises are able to get the funding. We also have other diverse ones, such as like maybe you have grants that they use, technical assistance funds that they also try and then assess, and then they use it to support these women-owned businesses in their capacity building, so to ensure that, look, if there are, they lack certain key personnel within their businesses, they recruit those key personnel for this enterprise and ensure that they're able to grow and achieve what they need to achieve in terms of profitability, performance, and other things. For many individuals who want to invest through gender lens, definitely they will have to use the bank-based or capital market-based institutions. And the banks that have, such as through savings, and they have different kinds of products that they can invest through the banks and ensure that finally it gets to these women-owned enterprises. So we have diverse examples that later on we'll share, but then we have more also in our book chapter that will encourage others to read.
Great. So last call for questions from the audience. We're going to seek to wrap up in about 10 minutes here. We've done a deep dive into gender lens investing on the ground, around the world, on many continents. We've heard of multilateral cross-government examples, for-profit examples, nonprofit examples. We've talked about what does it mean to actually do it, and how do you do it, and how easy it is to do it. And Kristin said it's very easy. Just talk to yourself or your family or your foundation or your investment advisor or your institutional consultant and encourage them to add this as a criteria for evaluation. So as we start to wrap up, let's go around to each of the co-authors. Tell us, in a short, 1 minute or less, what's next? What's your vision? What's doable this year, or what's coming in 5 years? Angelica, do you want to go first?
Yes, I think that it's due to either this new funds looking for startups led or started by women, as well as this whole thing related to ESG. These two have put a positive pressure towards funds, towards investors to start implementing gender lens investing in their programs, in their companies. And then I think that's a huge opportunity that cannot be lost. And so that these initiatives can make sure that what they are supporting, financially supporting, makes sense, is to really apply a serious scorecard. You see, I see that because all of a sudden, all has become in general, okay, I'm talking about, in this case, very specific, by the way, for Brazil. I'm not talking the name of other countries, but where I'm based, and I see that there's this whole hype about, okay, so everybody now wants to become gender lens, aligned with gender lens investing. That's fine, that's fantastic, that's a good start, but make it properly, right? So, and in this sense, I think that, also in our chapter, there is this table with our learnings, the learnings of Morais, and recommendations. And I think that one of the main ones is first a self-assessment, and second is make sure that you build the gender architecture and capabilities, and that you apply and follow a scorecard properly. So this would be really my main comments in terms of how to take the best out of this moment of really that there is a topic that is more and more being discussed among the investors groups.
Got it. Okay, great. Carmen, how about you? What should we look forward to this year or in the next couple of years?
Yes, well, basically, I totally agree with Angelica, but gender lens investing, it continues to be a niche. So we need to support investors. We want to support investors to get into gender lens investing. We need also to promote further progress leading into this as a mainstream. And for that, we need to collect more data. We need more publications, such as one we are launching today. We need also more studies. We need to give access to different success stories. We will need also to give investors different toolboxes, toolkits, as the scorecards and others, to support them and to help them to start doing this type of investment. And for me, something that it's important, we need also to share more information. We need a platform for gender lens investing. So that is something that we look forward to. We want one-stop shop for gender lens investing. And of course, in the case of Morais, for that, we are organizing our Latin America annual Gender Lens Forum next October 21st in Mexico. So I hope everybody can join us. But this is one event. We need to promote more of these spaces for investors, entrepreneurs, and different type of organizations that want to get into gender lens investing.
Great. And that's this year, October, or 2021 or 2022?
Yes, this year, October 21st in Mexico City.
Okay.
We hope it will be in person, but if not, we'll have to do it as a virtual event.
Okay, we look forward to it. All right, Michael and Richmond, how about you? What is happening? What should happen this year or soon?
So I think for me, we need three things. One is just listening to the earlier comments from Sylvia and Elsa. So we still have a lot of work to do to break existing stereotypes around, there's always this notion that the mentality about what it means to take a loan and you have to pay an interest. This notion as well that microfinance is a trap. So you have all those mentality issues that it can take a lot to break those stereotypes. And when you then put yourself in the place of the women entrepreneurs, it's almost like a goldfish in a fish pond where there is billions of money around, but you can't get them in the terms that you want. And so a lot of discussion needs to take place, a lot of understanding of the metrics that are out there and how they can be taken on board and adhered to, both for the women, but also for the local level fund managers. A lot of what the fund managers on the ground are saying is, it's one thing to be the investor somewhere in the world and you are thinking that you are doing good, and you may not always appreciate some of the risk on the ground. And so that on the ground presence and how the sort of conversation we are having here can also be taking place on the ground. The second one that I see is record keeping. You have the challenge of many women not even having regular bank accounts or keeping proper records of the business they are doing. So we are starting to see credit referencing bureaus in many African countries now, but there is limited awareness about the fact that this credit referencing bureau are now exposing so many practices that entrepreneurs are not aware of. And then before you know, you're no longer in a position to take a loan. So there is a lot of work to be done around, although we can develop some of these matrices, what the consequences of things like credit referencing bureaus that are starting to be popular at the moment and having background checks, starting to input the details of entrepreneurs into different systems might have for the future. So those two aspects for me, the awareness and breaking the stereotypes to make sure to convince the local industrialists and owners of some of these funds locally that gender lens investing can work. Working with the women to develop more understanding that it is a difficult challenge to raise capital, but also to deliver it in terms of the interest and all the conditions that come with that. And then the formality aspect, and one area that we need to really discuss is the effect of credit referencing bureaus.
Great. And Richmond?
Yeah. Thank you very much. So having engaged with policymakers, fund managers, bank-based institutions, non-profits within the sector in Africa, there are three things that also emerges. The future looks exciting, subject to the following three things. One, we need to create that enabling environment because it's very essential. We need to ensure that public policies incentivize and enable women-owned business people to access funding and then support them to reduce the constraints that they normally confront or encounter. And secondly, the issue of awareness, as has been alluded to by other speakers, they need to create more awareness as to the criteria and the processes by which they can even access some of this fund from private equity fund managers and also from bank-based institutions. And finally, the issue of impact. The impact metrics from fund managers, many of the fund managers also are still asking questions. How do they ensure that they develop their impact metrics and then ensure that they embed it in their strategies so they can measure whatever it is that they are doing and then tell a very good story regarding what initiatives they are undertaking. So these are the three main areas that I think we need to look at. Thank you.
Super. And then we're going to go Kristin, Ted, Elsa, and then Nigel will wrap us up. Okay, Kristin, what's in the future in your crystal ball? And
okay, well, it's not so much the crystal ball. I think it's really in the air. Well, particularly in the US, where we're having this issue with guns. And I think what is clear is that women are not the ones using the guns. to kill people. And so I think it's coming up as we figure out how to deal with gun violence. We're also figuring out that women can be part of the solution there. And we can be, once women are unleashed to do their investing, we may not invest in weapons companies anymore. You know, it's just not safe for our families. It's not safe for our communities. And so when women are directing more money now, and the men that care about women, when they start directing money with a gender lens, we're not going to have these types of issues. And then we also have this wealth transfer that's happening. So not only are millennials, but women, particularly in the US, are going to be in charge of so much more money, trillions of dollars. And so as this wealth transfer happens, we're going to see gender lens investing pick up, because when women are making the decisions, they're going to be going to their wealth advisors and their asset managers to say, these are my values and this is what I want to see, whether it's women reflected either at the tops of companies or even in asset management. You know, where I sit, women and people of color combined make up 1.3% of the 70 trillion money of assets managed. So to the extent we can find more balance, women are going to step into direction roles. And I think we're going to see more balance from corporate leadership all the way through to asset management. And then, of course, in our consumer decisions. So the wave is here and it's strong. And I see some hope for some balance, both on the environmental side as well as on the social and government side.
Yeah, and I saw some of that too at Ashoka. When I worked at Ashoka, we funded business social bridges and partnerships. And so working with Cemex, the cement company of Mexico, they had a micro purchase program where you could buy bags of cement instead of truckloads of cement. And so when they partnered with a women's nonprofit against domestic violence, and a one-room house was able to be doubled to a two-room house through that program, then domestic violence dropped 40%. So there's more of these hybrids that can happen as well. All right, Ted, what's your vision? And then Elsa will summarize.
Yeah, very quickly, women's job quality really needs to be studied. The kinds of jobs that come out of these investments, the kinds of claims that are made, and we know from the pandemic just how important frontline workers and other women's jobs are. And you know, you need wages, you need good conditions, you need healthcare access, and a variety of things. So I think that's a really important piece, and it's a global issue. The other thing I would say is, in the medium to longer term, it would be really good to have some smart professional education. We could engage our universities and really do some serious programs on GLI. I know there are courses, but how to consolidate the best, most independent thinking and knowledge, having practitioners and scholars talk to each other, I think would be a terrific next step. Thanks.
Super. All right, Elsa, you've brought everybody together. We have 4 chapters on gender lens investing. We have short-term, medium-term, long-term visions. We have frameworks for how to invest and how to measure the impact of it. So what do you see this year or going forward?
First of all, perhaps departing a bit from what we wrote in the book, also then speaking perhaps more widely, as Ted has mentioned, we make a bit this sort of reflection in the article that we have in the book. It is called Gender Lens Investing, Co-Creating Critical Knowledge to Build a Credible, Durable Field. So I think there are some steps that need to exist before we can really advance. And this has to do exactly with this, what we call this co-creation of critical knowledge. So this has various dimensions. The first one is to really go beyond the rhetoric that we see around that, because it's pro-poor, it's for the vulnerable populations, not because it's sustainable business, whatever the buzzwords are. We need to be more rooted into hardcore evidence. So we need less rhetoric, more evidence for higher and more effective commitments. We really need to show that it is having an impact that the population keeps on having a sustainable, living wage, that they manage to get out of poverty for a sustainable period of time, and so on. So this has to be something that is backed by evidence. So as with many emerging fields, we need to bring some validity into these claims that we see around there, that of course gender matters, and of course if we're doing something with the poor and with the vulnerable, we will eventually bring about some impact, but we need to be more precise. So we need to know what works and especially what does not work. And this is exactly where the learning part is. And I do not see it in, well, it's common in throughout, but in here, you can see it clearly that we are not, I think, exposing the lessons learned about what does not work. So there's a lot of learning in there, examining failure. A lot of things fail. And you look at the reports, you look at the publications, you look at the interventions, and nobody talks about it. I would love to organize something on failure and how we can learn. It would be so much more insightful. Which is also mentioned in the chapter, we need to demonstrate successful exits. We really need to prove that they are successful and that they keep on hanging on throughout time. We need also to account and to learn to think how to account for the financing needs of specific people, indigenous people, vulnerable populations. We need to bring in things that are already in other fields, indigenous methodologies, and then we need to apply them here. So even going beyond gender into, smaller subsets of women. We need to refine impact methods, impact assessment methods, to credibly demonstrate that the information that we have is rooted on evidence, and that we can, of course, generalize it, because that is a problem, because it might work within a specific, very specific setting, but then you cannot take it elsewhere. The other thing that we mentioned that is connected is replicating what works, right? Because this is a low-hanging fruit. And as we mentioned, this is a sort of scaling sideways, right? So we take what we know that has worked, we assess the context, and if we do it properly, perhaps there's a big probability that it will be successful. So replicating things that have worked, perhaps it's something that is more immediate and we can see happen quite soon. Then I have mentioned also before, we need more South at the steering wheel. We need to have, these countries in the South, demanding from their own perspective and developing their own tools and methodologies. Sometimes you just tend to take ours, whatever has worked in our own contexts, to other countries or to other regions, and they need to be contextualized for sure. And then also integrating GLI into infrastructure. So there have been new developments in here. So applying GLI principles into things that perhaps we would not think as much, such as, ports, roads, renewable energy. There's a whole, world out there. And if we want to properly link it with the SDGs and going beyond what I see throughout, which is my project, my investment will contribute to SDG X, Y, and Z, but going beyond it and actually being able to clearly link it and measure it and provide, at least if not an attribution link, at least a very strong contribution link. But for that, we also need some sort of kind of theory of change of how it all operates, okay, so that we can measure it, even if it's qualitatively, so that we can assess it in a credible way. So integrating GLI into infrastructure is something that can also be done immediately. There is an Australian publication from 2019. It is called Gender Ambition Framework of the Private Infrastructure Development Group, which has a framework and metrics for investors to classify infrastructure projects based on gender equality dimensions. This is something that can also be done immediately. And lastly, the chapter also provides sort of 5 key elements of where we should go in terms of this whole research agenda that we need to put in place to make these or to elevate it to a recognized and credible, fully credible field, which is aligning also the research and the policy agendas with that from the SDGs. We're already into the 10-year period. So, the clock is ticking, and we need seriously to think about how we are aligning ourselves and contributing to the global goals. We need to establish a community of practice. So this is what we have in here. It's a very small example, but there are various others, and Jean has been doing a lot. There are other scientific networks, academic networks that somehow have been touching upon these issues, but we need to grow, I think, wider, and this community of practice needs to encompass not only academics and researchers, but also the private sector, the investors and the investees, and then hopefully everybody that wants to be involved in this field. We need to apply theory, building concepts, and as I have mentioned, because if we need to measure it, we need to understand how it operates, and also reinforcing what was said before. This is the fourth element. We need to deepen our empirical knowledge, evidence-based knowledge on what works, and in there we need to credibly assess impacts. And finally, as Edward has mentioned, we need to really develop more ways of people having access to GLI information and methodologies and scorecards and everything that is going on through education, and especially I would say in developing countries and in continents such as Africa and Asia, ways in which perhaps through e-learning, and we have the tools. We have so many tools that we can get hold of to make it accessible, to make it cheap, and to make it valuable, to be able to make the difference. So we have the knowledge, we have the tools. We sort of know each other, or we start to know each other better. So we better start doing it right now.
There's no lack of work to do. We have a long list, and we have compelling visions together. I want to thank everybody for all your leadership in the world, for making the world more balanced, more equitable, and helping us live the lives that would be more fulfilling for us all. So Angelica, Carmen, Kristin, Michael, Richmond, Ted, Elsa, thank you so much for your valuable chapters in the Global Handbook of Impact Investing. The link is in the chat. And Nigel, bring us home. And we appreciate everybody having this deep dive 90-minute version of Gender Lens Investing on ESGX. Over to you, Nigel.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all very much. There's clearly a huge amount in there. And I think one thing I wanted to say right at the end is, this is clearly a long journey. I put up this image behind me, which is a statue in Central Park of three famous women in terms of the rise and of the importance of women in American society. This statue was only erected last year. It's been in place just over 7 months. Until then, there was only one statue of a woman in Central Park, and that was Alice in Wonderland. So we still have perhaps a little further to go in all of this. Now, one of the points just mentioned by Elsa was the importance of perhaps learning from Indigenous knowledge. And there is a great book by Tyson Yunkaporta, who's an Australian Indigenous academic and all-round good human, who's written a book, Sand Talk, How Indigenous Thinking Can Save the World. And save the date, because he should be joining us, and we hope with Old Man Juma on the 23rd of April, the 24th, in the Asia Pacific region, to talk about that book and indeed the importance of systems thinking through another lens. Now, beyond that, if you are joining us on YouTube, then please do hit the like button. Please do share this with your friends and help amplify the messages of all of our guests. If you do that, it really helps. Every click brings about 10 more people to the video. There is on live.esgx.org the recordings of everything we've done since the beginning. This is more than 40 subjects now, and we've covered all sorts of things which, as we've heard today, intertwine, because there's gender lens investing and there's LGBTQ, etc. And these things all are different but important and interconnected things. And finally, I'll hand to you, Paul, just to introduce next week's episode, which is going to cover something more from the Impact Investing Handbook too.
Yes, so another theme in the Global Handbook of Impact Investing is place-based investing. And so that's a deeper dive into a community how to do that across sectors and across asset classes. So Lauren Agnew, who authored that chapter in combination with our Green Jobs monthly report on where are green jobs growing or shrinking, and how is pay related to green jobs growing or shrinking. And spoiler alert, green jobs are more resilient and they pay more, so we should have more of them. So we'll do a deeper dive into place-based impact investing, and we'll have examples from Brazil in Curitiba, in India, and in California. So please join us next time on ESGX. Thanks very much to our producer, Nick Gower, my co-host, Nigel Lake in New York. I'm Paul Herman in San Francisco, and we'll see you